Oh, hey again, Ben. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
Good, good. Awesome to have you here again. Today I'm going to be asking Ben a few questions about how do you pronounce it? Do you pronounce it how the FXCK or do you just
Yeah,
say
it's how the fuck. You just got to.
Oh, yeah. All right. How the fuck? I'm super curious how you came up with the idea. And basically, I had to look at your LinkedIn profile. So it seems like you had mostly growth and demand gen experience, right? And then SEO as well.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I was working I've always worked in startups in like
mm,
marketing roles, like software companies, and when the podcast and like community first started, it was not about SEO. So now it's like dedicated to SEO, but it was more about just general like how did these people that I see and like want to achieve results like them, how did they do it? Hence the name, how the fuck? Like how the fuck did you
mhm.
do it? And that just kind of came to me one day and I was like, why not? Let's do it. Let's call it that. Um, and then basically I just started interviewing people like my first ever episode was with April Dunford, who was like,
Wow.
yeah, like exactly. It went from me being like in a small startup with like no real resources to having like an hour call with like Chris Walker and April Dunford and all these people and just yeah, kind
How
of
the fuck did you do that? Because they're like so hard to, get on events.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, April Dunford, I had messaged her about her book. I was reading that
Mm,
positioning book she has, which is
yeah.
amazing. And then I just emailed her like, I'm thinking of starting this. Do you want to take a chance on a brand new podcast? And she was like, yeah, sure, why not?
Oh.
And that episode got like it went viral on Hacker News or something.
Mhm.
This is like the first ever episode accidentally went viral on Hacker. Like someone else submitted it on Hacker News, and then it got like 30,000 page views overnight. Which is
That's awesome.
which is just insane,
Yeah.
and it's still the best you know podcast I've done. But anyway, yeah. So I started doing that. Mostly it was because I wanted to learn marketing and like learn from the best people how exactly they did it and ask the questions I wanted to ask, and share that with the world. And then kind of over time, it became I started niching down into like SEO and bringing much more focus on like
Mm.
search and content and like scaling content in particular. Like increasingly, it went towards that. Um,
So you're doing that full time now, or?
yeah, pretty much. So I went full time in December, um, and I do like SEO consulting and content consulting stuff on the
Mhm.
side. On the side, I don't know which is on the side anymore. Like both are like my full
Yeah.
time thing. But yeah, I was doing this podcast on the side for so long, and eventually it was like it's making enough money that I don't, you know, I don't have to just do it on the side. I could just go full time and try to really grow it.
Hmm.
And yeah, took the jump and yeah, really happy about that. And yeah,
That's really fast because you started. Well, when did you start? It was last year as well, wasn't
it
it?
was so when was that? I think honestly the first ever episode went live like April 20 or early 2020, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, so it took a while to grow it to the point where you could like
Yeah.
make the jump rather than just. I thought this was like this one of these instant success
Yeah.
stories where, yeah, you got April Dunford and then it just went viral and then you had to quit your job because suddenly,
Oh God, no. Yeah. No, it was like this. It was just like a really windy path because the first 30 episodes were like very general marketing. And
Mm,
I took like a year off. And that's when I was like head of demand for a SaaS company. Um,
gotcha.
I couldn't do both. I was kind of burnt out and I
Mm,
from the pandemic and all of that. And I was just like, I'm not going to do both. Um,
yeah,
and then I started to realize um like I shouldn't have given up the podcast because I loved it. I'm learning so much. It was, it's a really cool thing and enjoyable thing for me. Um, so I just started it up, and then it did start going really well. And then like the day I quit, another post went viral, which was that Monday.com.
hmm
Monday.com, like how they scaled 1,000 articles in 12 months, case study, which was like, it was the nice little confidence boost from the day I quit, to like suddenly it went from like 30 premium members to like 100, like in a very few, in a couple of weeks, just because of that case study.
That's
Nice.
that's huge. But yeah, that case study is also like getting the right people on the podcast who have something that is really, inspiring to share, and they can like walk your audience step by step through it. But I'm also curious how, you used your quite diverse experience, right? Because there is a bit of SEO, there is a bit of growth, there is a bit of demand gen. How you used it to grow your podcast. Did you kind of rely on these spikes, or do you have like a plan how you're promoting it and stuff like that?
Yeah, good question. I think, like my background, I feel has always been like I've been handed like grow the revenue of this company by the founder of a startup, and so that's always led me down the like content marketing, SEO kind of route. So it just made sense, and like over my career, like that's the area I got more and more and more expertise in. So it just made sense that I started focusing on that, and like that really helped me now, like kind of bring that to the questions I ask and the guests I get on, and kind of ask them all the questions that I know that the listener is having. Like, you know what I mean? Like I know, like I've actually tried to do this before, and I know how difficult, like with you, for example, when you're on it, like I'd actually tried with Webflow to do programmatic SEO before for a company. And so I kind of knew like the bit that I found difficult. I really wanted to ask you that. Like, how did you do that? What's the kind of tricks of this? Because I know like someone going fresh, like I knew already the questions that I have. Anyway, so to your question about how I grow it, like actually, I use like social every time. Like that's really the growth channel. Like there's a few like kind of techniques, or like a few kind of different attempts at maybe growing the search traffic that are going on in the background, but I just haven't had time to actually kind of do it. I think SEO is like very time intensive.
Yeah, especially in this niche, right? That's like super saturated.
Yeah, God, yeah, it's the worst. Like trying to find an uncompetitive kind of opportunity in the SEO keyword niche is like really, really difficult. But I have found some, but it's still it's slow on that side. So yeah, most of my growth comes from LinkedIn, and I'm kind of honing a process of kind of repurposing the podcasts into different kind of insights and different stories and things which help grow my LinkedIn. Basically, that's how I do it. And so every week I will either like write up the case study that we talk about, like the whole playbook of like how Monday did this or how Typeform did this, and just really try to give like the best stuff from the podcast, or I'll focus on I don't know, like one specific thing, like how to hire 10 places to hire writers easily or something, which is like something that someone mentioned on the podcast. So I'm just going to like take their insight and then turn it in, like expand on it myself and go and find like way more about it and like turn it into it. So I'm kind of like pulling topics from things that I found interesting about what someone said, and then being like at the end, if you want to hear more about this, go to the podcast. That kind of thing.
Content repurposing, essentially.
Yeah. Like, not just like straight repurposing, but just like kind of listening to what other people are finding interesting about an episode and then like expanding on it.
Yeah, gotcha. Especially that you do have this experience, and as you said, you're asking questions that people are struggling with, and that kind of shines through, like with this example with programmatic SEO in Google Sheets versus Webflow. Like, I really loved your write-up because it actually included insights from your own experience, so you could get like a more well-rounded view. Yeah. So mostly LinkedIn. Do you use any other socials or
Yes, like to varying degrees. Like before I would write a case study on Twitter and then turn that into a LinkedIn carousel. But it takes so much time. All of it takes
Oh,
so much time. It's crazy. I've been experimenting with YouTube at the moment. But again, I'm not like, I know I'm like cutting a clip to make into a YouTube short. And it gets like, I think that one of them had like 200 views. So it's not like massive. But it's 200 views it wouldn't have got otherwise. So why not?
yeah, it helps, but also, as you said, like it just seems so easy, right? Because kind of the path from A to Z, but it's actually time consuming just to
Yeah.
do the stuff. And often I tried outsourcing that kind of thing to VAs, and sometimes I would end up spending more time fixing things after them
Yeah.
than I would have done otherwise. So I think like I don't have a good system for repurposing.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
if you are like, I don't know, like a content writer or like a content manager, or like kind of by nature, what good content looks like. I think
Mm,
it's really hard to just outsource it. Like it's really hard to get from your head to someone else what you think is quality, because you end up
yeah.
being quite perfectionist.
And
And
there
all,
are so many variables, right? It's like when I was writing this last post about how, AI content compares to human written content, like good content, say Ahrefs level content.
yeah,
And I'm like, what does it actually take, right? That makes a difference. And it's only when you like really analyze it pretty much paragraph by paragraph that you see the differences. It's very hard to explicitly communicate or teach people what the difference is.
it's super.
Um, so yeah, but that kind of brings me to the question of this, well, episode. Is not a podcast, it's kind of like more an hodgepodge of different content types, what I'm doing. Yeah, ChatGPT, are you using it currently to help you with your content, or you think it's not there yet? If so,
Mm.
then what you're using it for?
I am really torn on this topic, but I agree. Like when you did that breakdown of good versus what cheap chat GPT wrote, like that's what I'm seeing as well. Like it's not that good.
Mm,
Honestly, like if you really like one, it's kind of obvious, even if you tell it to not be obvious, like it's okay, but it's a little like, but I think just it only so far, from my experience, delivers something that feels surface level and not
mm,
like really expert or like something like that. Doesn't mean it's not good for some audiences, but for me, when I'm personally learning, I do really, really value experience and expertise. Um, that being said, I do use it, and like I use it in different ways. So I can just tell you if you want
yeah,
different ways I use it.
spill the beans.
Um, one of the ways that I've been using it recently is when I see that I've written a kind of wordy sentence, um, like say in the middle of an article or something
Hmm.
like I just can't be bothered to like sit there and think through every word, or I don't have time. I will do, for example, I'll put it in ChatGPT and say, give me 5 different versions of this sentence that are more simple and concise, but say the
Mm,
same thing. Like that's really good because it just speeds up your writing, kind of gets off.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, when you're trying to be like really concise, it works for LinkedIn posts too. Um, when you're feeling like you're being a bit wordy, just like cutting the sentence, getting different ways of saying the same thing. Um, so that's one way that I actually find it useful on a day-to-day basis. Um, another way is I often ask it like, what have I missed?
Huh,
So I'll go
right.
like, yeah. So I'll go um, like, here's an article I've just written, or here's an outline that I've written. What have I missed? Like, what would make this better than
Mm.
other content? Like, what topic have I missed out in this when talking about this subject? Um, yeah, I think that's been pretty useful because it's just like an idea generator. Basically, it's like come up with something that I haven't thought of. Um, yeah, how like yeah, that's been pretty useful. As another way it's been useful as and like when I've been working with some clients has been clustering keywords. Like that's actually
Mm.
been as like kind of a manual task. Um, that I'm just like, here's a massive load of like list of keywords. Can you just put them into categories for me?
Mm-hmm.
And it would do that pretty well.
Oh wow, that's a cool use case. Yeah, yeah. Because
Yeah.
typically, well, I'm just curious how accurate that is, right? Because when you're using these clustering tools, it takes them forever to do that when you have a long list. Well, long can mean like, okay, 1,000 keywords to cluster them because they are supposed to have compare them against the SERPs, right? So
Yeah.
I'm just curious if it does it based on like probability or yeah, probably because it doesn't like go into the SERPs.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe
Yeah.
that's a good point to clarify. Like, it doesn't actually say something like these should go in the same article.
Mm-hmm.
It will just categorize, say like the one I did the other day. Here's everything on the topic of like crypto,
Mm.
for example. Can you categorize these keywords? And then it will put it all into like, okay, here's all of the keywords on like regulation, law, legalities, like legal white papers, and it doesn't have to include the word legal or law, but it will kind of understand the keyword and categorize it into the law space, and then I can from there maybe break it down into like blog posts which make sense, and that kind of thing. So it's not like it doesn't fit the SERPs.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, clustering in its own right is like super difficult. And sometimes even when I get the output from the clustering tools, I'm like,
Yeah,
not sure, right? This was very helpful because a lot of them are just
definitely.
variations of the same. So pretty obvious they should go into the same article.
Yeah.
But with the other use cases, it's definitely interesting how like you also mentioned when we were talking about it last time that you're using it to use the transcripts of your podcast recording and like clean it up.
Yeah,
So
that's been useful for sure. Um, if I want to, yeah, I mean, it's great at basically if I can give it a dump of a transcript, it can clean up the like all of the filler words, like the ums and ahs and things. It will just smooth that out and make it a readable thing. So if I'm going to put that in my content, I don't have to go and correct it all. And for that, like for podcasting, actually, it's really good. Like there are some ways like you can say, here's the transcript. Can you tell me like the top 10 topics? And you can use that as your like key takeaways or like describing the podcast or yeah, anything like that. Really, it's really good. I mean, and if you want to, it depends how like for you could get a really good version one of an article basically and say like, here's the transcript, can you just turn this into basically add headers to this content, like break it up into headers, like rewrite sections, basically turn it into how you can put expert insight into your into it, like turn it into an article. But it doesn't work that well. It's like any content. Like it might actually have more substance because it's from a podcast, but it doesn't necessarily, it doesn't necessarily write it in a way that you find perfect or natural, or what you would have said. Like it works the same for quotes. Like sometimes I'll have a podcast transcript and I'll say, "Can you give me the top 10 quotes that are really interesting for like this audience?" And then it just pulls out things that aren't really that interesting.
It makes things up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like hallucinations are
Yeah.
a thing. I found it useful for, as you said, like if there are kind of multi parties in a transcript or even in an article, right? I want to kind of say summarize a roundup article and walk away with like the quotes by the author, right? Or quotes by different authors on a specific topic.
Yeah.
Then it will sort of sift through it and reorganize it quite nicely, but you still need to watch for these hallucinations because sometimes it like just adds something extra from itself. Yeah.
So random that it does that. It would literally,
Yeah.
like if you ask it anything, like I can't remember what it was I did the other day, but oh yeah, I asked it. I was writing an article on SEO testing experiments, and I was like, "Can you give me 5 examples of experiments?" And it was like, "Yeah, sure." Like John something at HubSpot did this, and then I went to the internet, and there's like no like nowhere has that been done, and it just completely made all of the examples up.
Ah,
Yeah,
oh,
really interesting, but I
hmm,
didn't use those obviously. But
yeah.
I actually used it this week to write an entire article for the first time. Um, and for a client anyway, I was
Mhm.
testing. They came to me and they're like, should we use AI? And I was like, no, I don't think so, but like I'll test it.
Yeah.
And it basically did, like, I wrote an article in like a couple of hours, rather than, I don't know, outsourcing it for like, yeah,
Yeah.
$400 or whatever it would be. And it sped it up. And the thing that really worked was like it was a big like how to block like YouTube, the
Hmm.
website, on, and then it was like on mobile, on like, or each of the sections were how to block it on Mac, Windows, mobile,
Hmm.
and they're like really easy
Gotcha.
step by steps, like,
Yeah.
okay, step one, step two, step three. So I would literally take those step by steps from somewhere else on the internet, put it into ChatGPT, say, please rewrite this, make sure it's plagiarism free, because the steps are the
Yeah.
steps.
Yeah.
Like, and then um, I then went through and verified, like, I tested it out. Is this how you actually block it? Made sure it's accurate, added screenshots uh,
Mm.
of showing that in action. Yeah, and it was pretty good. But um, I did correct and add in my kind of human elements. So not perfect. My ultimate goal was like, I've got 10 of these to write, or to get someone to write. Can I just automate it all? But
Mm.
so far, I just don't think that's possible.
Yeah, again, it's about the process and kind of sort of separating all the small variables that go into like actually improving the output. So I had the same experience with the test I ran recently. It was also about a process. Um, and at some point, I was using Surfer SEO, so I wasn't using ChatGPT to generate the content. So they have this now, it's in beta, but it's coming out like end of May. So essentially, you just put in the keyword and the prompts are on the back end. So it takes like 15 minutes and then it spits out the whole article.
Oh, really?
Um,
Nice.
yeah, and that was pretty good, but it was something like related to how do you build links using roundup posts, right?
Mm.
Um, and then you had the step-by-step instructions of how to find the right resource pages in Ahrefs.
Mm.
And like I was actually comparing it to the Ahrefs article. So like the instructions were just, you couldn't follow them
Really?
because they were incomplete. So yeah, but then I took the fragments that were incomplete and pasted them into ChatGPT and asked it to actually add more steps so the process becomes, more clear and easy to follow. And they did that.
Yeah.
So then it's like, oh, I just need some screenshots to illustrate that now.
Exactly. Exactly. I think if you can take a pretty good step-by-step guide and just put it into ChatGPT and just say things like, make it more simple, make it more useful, make it more actionable, make it more
Yeah.
clear, like, add the steps that are needed, that's like super effective.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It can definitely save time and also, money on outsourcing because sometimes you outsource it to kind of like a mid-level writer and they still don't do the job. So they
Yeah,
have to wait a week to send it back. Well, with AI, it's instant. So I think that's the biggest advantage, actually.
yeah, that's very true.
Um,
Hmm.
yeah, what do you think, like, with all this considered, it's like obviously super early. A year ago, we weren't even talking about ChatGPT in terms of content creation. So I feel like the landscape has changed completely. I'm going to Brighton SEO with my team this week, so I'm super
Nice.
curious what like other SEOs have to say about this. But I wanted to hear your take. What do you think the future of content will be with AI?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's kind of a question that I've now started also asking every
Mm.
podcast guest that I bring on, because I'm like, this is so important. I had like a kind of a freak out moment
Yeah. Yeah,
about
who didn't?
it. I was messaging someone like, what do you think about this? Like, I just, because I find like and this is like my industry, like SEO and like content, and I think if not now, like we talk about it, it's not that good, it's not good enough, but like this is, if you think about it, only GPT-4.
Mm-hmm.
Like GPT-3 was only like a month ago, so like could we be like, you know, I don't know, like what happens when we're at GPT-10 and it's like incredible and it's better than every content writer out there, and like is that where it's going? Then I'm like, okay, if that becomes the case, how do we really differentiate? Like if it gets incredibly good at like genuinely having experience and feeding off real insights and doing that itself, then I kind of worry about what will be the future of content marketing. I'm not
Mm.
sure how will Google respond. Like will ultimately they need to protect their search engine from AI content, or not? I don't know. Um, but I think as SEOs, like we're always gonna have a job, because as long as there's search engines, like it might change dramatically, but like, you know, I don't know, it might change, but either way, like we're going to need to help people be found on Google, like however Google does start to look. There will always be a role for SEOs, and I think also content like um is always going to be important for like building trust and authority and like educating your target audience. But I honestly don't know like how um I do think it's going to change like a lot
Mm.
in the next few years. If
What
not,
do you think could be the differentiator? Because I'm also thinking like, okay, if it's based on probability and it still will be, then it's kind of conjuring up the next, like most likely set of tokens basically in a sentence. So that can lead to a lot of misinformation. And
mhm,
if we start like publishing tons of AI generated content, will we kind of get into this rabbit hole of fake news feeding off fake news, right? And
yeah,
yeah.
I think that's how you can differentiate and offer more value, is
Mm,
like being, I don't know, more like a more credible, trustworthy source
yeah.
for people to learn from. Um, I don't know how that plays out in search. Like, do they care increasingly about these like EEAT
Mm-hmm.
things like that are going on? Like, should people be doubling down on like their authority and their brand, and um, making sure every article comes from it appears like it's coming from a person at least? I think maybe leaning into content types that AI isn't going to be good at is something I would recommend, but um, I don't know. It's like there's a short term versus long term view here as well. Like I still wouldn't recommend, like it hasn't changed that much yet.
Mm-hmm.
So um, I don't know, but I think over the long term, yeah, like focusing on those topics that do require more experience, or at least making sure your content doesn't look like a bit rubbish now. Especially quality is important now, I think. And yeah, yeah. If the barrier is like in the next 2 years, is like if the barrier to creating like an average piece of content becomes like lower and lower and lower
Mm-hmm.
because of ChatGPT, then I think like we need to get better at being outstanding, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think the content writers who can ultimately become editors and are able to turn these mediocre pieces of content into something outstanding because they understand what outstanding is.
Yeah.
And this among like the content people that I've worked with is incredibly rare. I've had a few like stellar content writers that can like produce really amazing pieces out of nothing, like on seemingly boring topics.
Yeah.
But these are rather exceptions than the rule. So yeah, I'm curious, will fewer people work in content? I probably would say that their entry barrier will be much, much higher because there won't be enough to write mediocre content. You will have to have the insight, the like
Mhm.
skills to turn mediocre into exceptional.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But like where do you learn how to make exceptional without going through the kind of bad stage of writing as well? And
Right.
I don't know. Yeah, it's tough. It's a tough one. But I think if I had to give, I'm trying to think what advice I would give. I'm kind of worried someone would be listening and like freaking out. But um, I think that like learning what quality is, I almost think like building experience and expertise in an area or a topic would be good as well. I think good content writers are really good at researching and things like that. So it doesn't matter which, area they're in, but also if you are able to specialize and get experience, I would recommend. I think that's probably a good idea at this point. Like, undoubtedly, you would be good at writing about marketing and like that kind of stuff. And probably because of your time at user pilot, obviously you're like developed an expertise in like product
Right.
and that stuff. Yeah. But like if you now became a freelance writer and started writing about other areas, like maybe you'd have less same with me, like less less authority or less to offer on that topic. It's kind of like specialize a little bit and so then
Yeah.
you get quality.
It takes a long time to gain enough of this like tacit knowledge to
Mhm.
see the opportunities to enhance something. And I see that with our junior editors in-house that, at first they just don't get why this piece of writing is wrong because it was just flat. It wasn't explaining things in enough detail to make the process actionable, for instance. But since they haven't actually followed through with the steps yet, they weren't able to tell that.
Yeah.
So yeah, totally agree. Specialization will become more important. Well, thank you so much, Ben. That was incredibly interesting, insightful. I'll be sharing that shortly. Do you think there's anything I should have asked you that I didn't? Maybe something interesting, an interesting project you're working on you'd like to share?
I think we covered it pretty well. Yeah, thank you. It's been a great interview. I'm trying to think, what else am I working on? No, not really. No, I have to. I'm kind of have to ask you maybe separately to this interview, like different tips and things. But yeah, I'm kind of forming how the fuck from a content community into more of like what I like a community where people can talk to each other and ask questions, and I think that's for me like the future of it. I
That
think
would be really cool. Yeah, yeah, as well to have a platform to chat with other growth
yeah,
and content marketers.
yeah, definitely. I think that's what yeah, kind of like specialized LinkedIn where you can actually talk. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's very distributed across a lot of like WhatsApp channels and Slack
Yeah.
channels and yeah.
Yeah, no, Slack's an interesting one. I can't decide if it should be Slack or Circle or like there are community platforms, but um yeah.
Awesome. Have a great rest of your day then. And yeah, I'll ping you when I post that shortly.
Cool. Sounds good.
Cheers. Have a good rest.